So these are the folks here from New York.
Could you all do something for me before I answer this? Mic check! Oh, it's like music. Okay, so the question about media is I think a very pertinent one, because a lot of the questions and problems that we're drawing attention to in this movement are corporate control of our livelihoods, basically. And what we are doing, and I don't mean we on the stage, I mean we in this theater, I mean we in this country, we in this world, are doing is we're rewriting history, we're writing our own stories. And the only way that we can change this paradigm is to get it out in such a way that is more powerful than the narrative that is being written for us. The mass media and the news corporations and things like that, they're going to paint us all in a certain light, but we have the advantages now in this world through social media, through I mean, we can even self-publish books now. Like, we don't even need the publishing corporations. And anywho, we just have to use the advantages that have been given to us by those who have gone before us, and the strategies that have gone before us, to make sure that the story that we are telling and the narrative that we are writing is stronger and louder than any story that they can write and color us with. And as long as we are using every bit of our energy and every resource available to us to make sure that happens, we will not lose.
I just wanted to add to something Messiah said, something to go home with. I'm not an authority here, but it's important to remember that SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, has not been stopped. It's been shelved. And you're going to see efforts throughout the year to ramp up centralized power throughout the internet and the censorship of the internet. So I think one thing we should all be thinking about as we make this media, as we put this media out there, is building new paradigms and new online platforms to spread correct media, media that paints, that we want, that expresses our voices loudly and clearly, as he's saying. Something to keep in mind, and where to build those, how to establish these paradigms is above my pay grade. So I was hoping to get someone from media to maybe speak to that. But it's important to remember that, there was an amazing message sent to Congress 2 weeks ago, and we got SOPA shelved, but it's by no means a thing of the past.
Hi, everyone. So actually, we are coming from Boston last night, and while debriefing, like, a bunch of folks were having a conversation about the state and the police and how they respond to folks from Occupy Wall Street, and kind of talking about, like, what to do in light of that response. And personally, I feel that in talking about how the justice system and how the state responds to Occupy Wall Street and how they respond to activists, that it's a great opportunity to raise awareness and broaden the conversation on how the justice system is imposed on everyone, and not just folks who are engaged in organizing or activism work. There are groups in Occupy Wall Street. We have a group that's called Stop, Stop, and Frisk, a working group that highlights a policy that's exercised in New York City, where it's folks like to beat around the bush, but it's a racist policy that acutely affects people, pretty much young Black and Latino men. So when talking about the justice system, I feel like the best way to just unpack the bag and really just push the envelope is not to just speak about it in a limited scope, but to just talk about everything and talk about how the justice system impacts everybody. So we have a group, Stop, Stop, and Frisk. There's a lot of people who had been doing work before this movement came about that are now meeting people and connecting with other people that are doing work and having conversations around mass incarceration and talking about the prison industrial complex. So I don't know if that was where you thought I was gonna go with the answer to that question, but I feel like in talking about justice, we need to talk about how it affects everyone. And when we look at the 99%, we need to, that's a pretty broad range to say the 1% versus the 99%. So if you're having a conversation about justice, focus on and raise awareness and really unpack how justice affects every single member of the 99%. So folks who are in the prison systems talk about immigration policy, and I don't know if that answers your question to justice and hopefully what this movement is trying to do in regards to that.
There is no real reason. There was not any films from Occupy Boston. I've seen a couple that are really good. I just tried to, in general, curate a program that went chronologically from the forming of the first day of Occupy Wall Street, September 17th, up through events, direct actions in January. So in general, I wanted to create something that was chronological. And yeah, there's film and media out there from Boston. I'd love to know that there's rank and file union out there attending protests, picking up cameras, and shooting material for release by unions. But I haven't seen that much media coming from within unions. There have been a couple shorts I've seen that directly cover more likely news pieces that cover union participation at these rallies, especially at Occupy Wall Street. But yeah, we need more of it. Did you want to say something?
I was going to say open up to other.
And just real quickly, to be clear, a lot of there were many people who you saw speak in some of these films who are union people who were there in support of the movement, even if they weren't always identified as such in the film, to be clear.
Yeah. I'm just going to second that. I'm with the UAW, and we're down there day in and day out, but we don't necessarily feel the need to identify ourselves as that, because this movement is bigger than just one organization or one path. It's about bringing together all those different groups, and I think actually that's been, an important part of the movement, is to try to move beyond our own issues, and that's hard, but I think that's what's been really important. I don't agree. Also, I just want to say, if folks want to, we can open up questions to not stuff just focused on the films now, and then we'll move through a section about just next steps for Western Mass.
Yeah, for me, I guess my opinion on it, when I was 5 years old, when I would go to the corner store and I went to the candy section, and I saw there was 5 different types of Skittles, there was 6 different types of M&Ms. But I went with my grandmother to the voting booth, and she only had 3 choices for the leader of the free world. Right there, that's a problem right there, even before we figure out who we're going to elect, And I feel the Occupy movement is actually opening this discussion, and hopefully, right now, a lot of people are brainstorming what we can do about elections. It's pretty touchy, because SCIU already put in money. Steven Spielberg randomly put money. I don't know why, so it's a touchy subject. And for me, who I vote for, I haven't voted before. I didn't vote in 2008. I didn't vote in 2004. We have a managed democracy here, When you only have a little amount of choices for important issues that steer things in your life, we need more choices in this diddle-dee and diddle-dum, like Helen Keller wrote, That's just my opinion.
Yeah, to sort of build on that, for Occupy Wall Street, we've been very explicit within our community that we're not seeking to, as a movement, participate in electoral politics. And I want to be clear that I think, I have respect for people who are really invested in doing work in the electoral process. I believe that who is in office is not inconsequential, but I also greatly believe that the changes that I want to see in the world are not ever going to be brought about because some person gets put into an office. And so I'm out there with people who believe common things with me, to be in the streets, fighting for the things that I want to see, and not just voting for someone.
Okay, hi again. I want to second much of what Sully just shared. On the topic of electoral politics, I was over there cringing. I was like, oh my gosh. I do want to state that, so we're in the United States of America. If you were born here or if you do have citizenship status, I just want to put it on the table that folks should be aware that having that status is a privilege in this country, and I mean, folks are autonomous individuals, so be very wise with that privilege. I'm a non-native of this country, and I'm still not a citizen of this country, so I couldn't participate in the elections even if I wanted to anyway. I think if I were a citizen, I wouldn't necessarily want to participate because I don't really see any use in it. But I do want to be mindful of that. And I do want to say that it's February now, and there are going to be a lot of elections coming up in the fall. The movie on what Spain did was really inspiring, and since you're asking this question and since you are concerned about electoral politics, I don't think it's too late for a bunch of folks that if you do have the ability to vote and you do have that citizenship privilege and you do want to exercise some kind of force to perhaps do something that they did, or if you don't think that that would be applicable, that would apply to this country, to organize around what you do want to do. If you do feel that you want to engage in some extent with electoral politics, it's not too late to be forceful and to demand something that exists outside of choice A or choice B, and expecting that means anything.
Okay, so I want to talk about a few of the things that were just mentioned. First of all, there's a team of us across the country that work on something called Interoccupy, which is a network that's trying to create channels of communication between people who are engaged in the Occupy movement across the country and across the world. So there's conference calls regularly, and there's also there's actions listed from all over the country. So instead of figuring out how you can plug into New York when you're in Western Mass, figuring out how to plug in with each other in Western Mass and how to connect that back to the broader movement. And we're here to help you do that. And also, if you're just interested in the issues that we're discussing, there are general calls you can join. There's topical calls. We had a call about foreclosure a few weeks ago and alternative banking last week. So there's ways to plug in like that. I also wanted to say both about engaging in the political system and what it means to be nonviolent. I think there are certainly tensions within our movement. There are people who, there's a diversity of opinions, and those discussions are happening. They're happening in every occupation across the country locally, and then they're happening also through these national conversations, whether they're on the web or whether they're on conference calls. And there are people who want nothing to do with anything that's related to the current system, and there are people within the movement across the country that think that there are ways to make radical reforms that will actually change the system in some way. So I wanted to name that those discussions and debates are happening, and I don't think there's one answer. There's a lot of different answers to how we move forward and how we make change in the best way.
Just before we continue with the questions, my name is Javiera Benavente. I'm a local artist and organizer, and Rose asked me just to kind of moderate or facilitate the last section, which is to invite local organizers from the community to speak about connections that they see between Occupy movement across the country and then specifically in the area. How does this movement resonate with the work that you're doing? How does it not? What are some connections that you think could be made that haven't been made already? And how can people plug into the work that you're doing? So if folks can respond to that, that would be great. And I just invite any local organizers who are interested in chiming in to join us with questions.
So I think the question was, how do we keep this movement alive? I don't know if folks have answers to that.
I think it's going to grow.
So I work with direct action at Occupy Wall Street, and one of the things we've been focusing on over the last, I guess it's a month and a half now, is really making sure that we're targeting our actions so that they hit 5 main areas in order to bring people into the movement, in order to instrumentally affect the institutions, the 1%, as well as the folks who are organizing from below, as well as, now I'm blanking. But I think that the point of what I'm saying is the way that we bring people in, the way that we continue this movement is we continue bringing people in. We continue affecting people in their day-to-day lives in ways that are tangible, in ways that make them feel that they can make a difference, in ways that want them to make a difference. So when we like actually affect these targets, when we occupy foreclosed homes, we're not just like hitting the banks and hitting them where they hurt, but we're also providing the 99% with places to live. When we stop foreclosure auctions, we are directly affecting the banks again, and we're also creating like this collective environment in which we can feel empowered together. So I think that like one of the main ways that we can do this, one of the main ways that we can continue these actions and continue this movement is to really empower each other, to continue to create spaces that we can fill with our energy and that are accessible to everyone, and that really create real change in our lives.
This is basically the concise version of what he said, but I think it's all about two things, direct democracy and direct action. And direct democracy does create this horizontal platform, this horizontal growth where everyone feels empowered, and we encourage people to go back to their communities and hold general assemblies. And direct action affects the power structure in very real and meaningful ways. Those two direct systems.
Okay. Hi. I just want to say, when you're asking the tactics that I'm using, it's a group of folks that are involved in Occupy Wall Street and have been doing work around mass incarceration and doing work around the prison industrial complex that maybe met new people through Occupy Wall Street and are now working with those people that maybe they didn't know before to bring the movement forward. Michelle Alexander has an amazing book, The New Jim Crow, that folks should read. I just want to say it's not me. I pointed it out because I knew of that group and I went to one of their actions. Actually, the Friday before coming on this trip, the group Stop and Frisk had an action in the Bronx in a precinct that is one of these precincts that are heavily policed in this way with this Stop and Frisk policy. So that's something that they do on an ongoing basis. They do actions around this. They do civil disobedience. This specific action started at a hub in the Bronx by like subway stops, and folks gathered there. They had really big signs, and a lot of like passerbys, a lot of people in the community that didn't know about the action had the opportunity to get flyers and get to like understand what is happening in their community and how it's affecting their community members and their youth, their children. And it was folks gathered together, and then a rally that walked around and was just continuing to raise awareness as people walked down the street. They went to a precinct and like had to speak out in front of the precinct, and then it moved to a school in the community, and it was very powerful. There was actually some youth who were no older than 12 years old, who were 9, 10, 11 years old, sharing their experience at such a young age of being imposed upon by the NYPD and by surveillance, and like how it impacts their life and why it is so important to not ignore people who maybe are on the tail end of that. So they're like 9, 10-year-old Black and Latino boys, and maybe you're speaking to the people who have already been in that system and funneled through the system and now are on the other side of that system and are in incarceration. So there's Stop and Frisk, that's a group. There's also a group that's doing like prison solidarity work, and they meet on an ongoing basis, and they do have an action planned for the month of February. So I don't know if there's a way for folks who are not in New York City to plug into that. And I'm not 100% sure, but there's, I think Oakland or one of the cities on the West Coast might have put out like some kind of call for solidarity around like one of their major prison. I don't know the details on that. That's something that I would have to look into, but there's work being done around it. So with research or like plugging into like what folks are doing, there's a lot of work being done around that.
I just want to let folks know that we have about 10 or so minutes left of the question and answer period, and we want to take as many questions as possible. So if folks could keep their questions as succinct and brief as possible, that would be great.
There's a lot of, I think that what's important is for people to recognize that the movement is not in a specific place. The movement can be brought to wherever we are. So the movement has also been brought to many university campuses. So the first thing that I would say is, what can you be doing in your own community being your university, and what kind of change do you want to see here, and how can you organize to make that happen, and how can you connect to other students across the state, across the region, across the country who are also organizing for similar things in their communities and their universities. So that would be my first answer. And I would also say that, yeah, I'm going to stop there.
So So we were just in Boston, and I had the wonderful opportunity to stay with this very, very newly formed tiny occupation at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. And I wanted to speak to that because I think that directly affects, you know, college students, you know, public universities, private universities. College tuition is increasing all over the place. You know, colleges have become corporate private entities, and I think that one of the important things that you can say to your students is, you know, what changes do you want to see on your own campus? It's really interesting and really kind of funny. At UMB, they've set up 4 tents that were donated by what was formerly Occupy Harvard, set up in their student center, have tables. It's just like any other occupation at any other city that I've seen, or, you know, any other place that I've been that has an occupation with an encampment. It's also good to highlight things like housing issues within the colleges and things like that. So I would recommend and say, you know, talk to your students about what the changes that, you know, they want to see within their campuses, and how you could start a dialogue about how that could happen.
I just wanted to make a kind of even more base point that I think totally applies to what you asked, which is, I think that we find power in numbers. We find power when we can talk to people, when we can connect to people, when we realize we're not alone, when we realize we're all struggling with the same things. And that can look like 3 people in your living room talking some night specifically about issues that you care about. I mean, we all have so many things to talk about. We have so many things that infiltrate our heads and that occupy our conversations, but I think it's time to make this space intentionally to have conversations. And out of those conversations, I think the answers for any of your questions about what can I do and how can I affect things in the world will start to become clear. Next steps, at least, will become clear.
Yep, thank you so much. Thanks to everybody up here on the stage. And all of you, please help us clean up this space, because we need to be out of here by 9:30, and the space needs to be clean. And please join us tomorrow for all of the day's events and the General Assembly in the evening.